And we're here today to talk a bit about politics in this country. For a long time since Federation, many Australians weren't that interested in politics. They voted at elections, they followed the way their parents had voted, and they couldn't see the point really that, of course, we had a stable democracy in this country. But in the last couple of years, all that's changed. In the case of our party in particular, we now find that we're the largest political party in the country with 80,000 members, and we're contesting 151 seats in the House of Representatives. And right across this nation, meetings are taking place with our members. Last night in Melbourne, there were 4 meetings attended by over 400 to 500 people because they're concerned and they're angry that their democracy's been lost, that they feel they've got no hope for themselves, and they've witnessed the slow destruction of our country. They've seen the Prime Minister establish the National Cabinet to rob from the people, all the people they elected to serve in the Australian Cabinet. That federal members of Parliament and the institutions that we've got have been abandoned, all for the sake of politics, all for the sake of business, money, and the destruction of our economy. We know today Australia's got over $1 trillion of debt. But in all this crisis, this alleged health crisis, there's been no hospitals built. There's been no money put into further education for doctors or for nurses. There's been no recruitment of people overseas, and there's been no purchasing of medicine, other than purchase hundreds of millions of doses of vaccine when there's only 23 million Australians. It's been a waste of Australia's money and a transference of our wealth to another country. We've seen the destruction of small businesses. You only have to walk down Queen Street to see the number of shops that are vacant, the for lease signs. We've seen the lifetime work of many people being destroyed by a government that's hard and harsh, both at a state and a federal level. But most importantly, we've seen the abandonment from the political class, the Labor Party, the Liberal Party and the Greens of the Australian people. We know now that the Liberal Party and the Labor Party really don't have any policies that are different. We've seen the Labor Party adopt net zero in 2050. We've seen the Liberal Party adopt net zero in 2050. And we've seen that they're joined at the hip. So the United Australia Party is standing at this election because we have to provide hope and leadership and strength to all Australians. And I come here today full of admiration for our federal leader, Craig Kelly, and to announce to you all that we're standing senators in every state of Australia, and it's been decided that I will lead the Senate ticket at this election on a national level, and also to announce to you all some of our candidates for the coming Senate election. We've got an outstanding team right across Australia, and one of the features in our endorsement process was over 100 people in Victoria, in New South Wales, would nominate to become senators to represent the party at the coming election. So we're very confident that we'll play a key role in the Senate of the next Parliament. And our motto, of course, is that Australians can never trust Labor, Liberal or the Greens again. Our Queensland team is led by myself. I'm a former member of the House of Representatives. It includes manufacturing executive from Townsville, Martin Brewster, who's not here today because he's quarantining. He's in his last day of COVID quarantine, so he couldn't be here. We've got Desmond Addy here from North Queensland. Desmond's had a strong involvement in the Indigenous community in Queensland. He's served the people of Queensland for many years in a whole variety of organisations. And here from Brisbane, on my right, is Jack McCabe. Jack, 32 years of age, been active in our party politics for a number of years, and he's been selected out of a number of people to represent the state. So we're very, very confident in facing the state election. In New South Wales, our Senate team will be led by a former Deloitte CEO, Dominic Martino, and our second person on the ticket will be our State Director for New South Wales, Sue Ellen Wrightson from Newcastle, and one of our long-standing members, Wayne Moore, and medical practitioners, Michelle Martin and Johnny Yap, a marine industry executive, makes up the team with Stephen Ambrose. There's a large number of people standing in New South Wales, more you would say than we could possibly win Senate seats for. But such is the enthusiasm, such is the vigour, that people want to leave their employment and want to make a stand against what's been happening in our country, the slow destruction of our democracy. In Victoria, where our federal leader Craig Kelly has addressed over 200 and 300,000 people, which has scantily been covered by the media, we've got property executive Ralph Babbitt representing us in Melbourne. He comes from Melbourne. And a noted pilot, Roger McKay, who's served this country in the Air Force. And it's a great disgrace to see what's happened to our national airline, Qantas. And of course, we're happy to say that our third Senate candidate in Victoria is a Qantas former flight attendant, Kelly Moran, who took a courageous stand against people being blackmailed about losing their jobs, and she feels she's got an important point to play. The team's made up with company director Ken Grimman and another businessman, Andrew Cubberson from Melbourne, and an education executive from Andrew Lalor. So many people want to do something about what's happened to our country. So many people are enthusiastic to make sure it doesn't happen again. Indeed, we're in a state of change for our nation. And for those who don't think that's happening are those who are blind. Australians know how they've been treated. They know how their democracy's been trashed. And in South Australia, our Senate team is led by a finance executive, Michael Albram, and includes a nurse who left her job, made a courageous decision to leave her job when 3,500 other nurses left their job in South Australia because she put principle and courage over complacency and self-interest. In Western Australia, the business executive James McDonald heads the ticket, supported by our state director in Western Australia, Rob Forster, and human rights lawyer Andrea Tokali. The Tasmanian Senate team will be led by a successful small business owner who has seen her business and other businesses destroyed in Hobart and surrounding areas, Diana Adams, who'll be joined by Alan Hennessy as our Senate team in Tasmania. Alan's had a long and very distinguished military career in the Australian Armed Forces, and he views this as being a national crisis of which he's duty-bound to defend the country. In the Australian Capital Territory, we've got a number of people that have resigned their positions with the federal government, given up their careers because they thought they had to make a stand on the state of our nation. And James Savdoudis will lead the team, supported by Sean Conway. As Senate Leader for the United Australia Party, I'm in a position that I never thought I'd be back in politics. The reason that I've come back into politics and to take a key role at this important time is because of the state of the nation. We are facing a $1.3 trillion national debt. And if we pay back our debt at the rate of $10 billion a year, as the Treasurer has suggested, it means that in 250 years' time, Australia will be debt-free. It's hard to believe when John Howard left office that Australia was debt-free. It's hard to see the havoc, first under Gillard and Rudd, has wrought on the country. But if we look at the debt graph, we see that 80% of that debt graph has come under the prime ministerships of Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison and the Liberal Party. It's clear that the Liberal Party doesn't know how to manage the economy. It's clear that the Liberal Party is a party that just lives on debt and migration as a means of growth, rather than generating real exports and real growth for the countries. But you know, the political class that exists in this country, the Liberal and Labor parties, have joined together, not to criticise each other. And during the week I had dinner with an executive I've known for 40 years from the Liberal Party, one of their top people, who was very, very disappointed that we're standing at this election. And I challenged him to name one policy, just one policy, that differed with the Labor Party and the Liberal Party. and he was unable to do so. He assured me there were some, and he would get back to me when he read their policy documents. But at the top of his head, he couldn't think of one at all. So as I said, the Prime Minister has effectively negated the last federal election by appointing federal ministers who have no power, who have no say in how the country's run, and that power has been delegated to the National Cabinet, which is mainly made up of people from the Labor Party and other groups. So as the trumpet sounds at this point in history, we must rally round the flag, and that's what we're doing. The United Australia Party has true leadership and will provide in the coming months economic policies that will reduce and get rid of the debt, that will allow and set the country up for economic prosperity. At this election, though, more than any other, we must worry about democracy. We must worry about our freedom and our rights. After the election's had, we can be sure of one thing. If the Liberal and Labor Party gets back, there'll be more lockdowns. There'll be more destruction of our businesses. They're treating you very nicely leading up to this election. They can fool you once, as George Bush said. They can fool me twice, but don't let them fool you again. You know what they're like. These are the people that don't really care about our country, don't really care about our population, and don't care about the future of our children. So at that stage, I might end it and answer any questions. Anyone's here to answer any questions that you might have.
Does that make Craig Kelly your boss now? Who calls the shots?
Well, Craig Kelly's the federal leader. He's certainly the boss of the party.
He's your boss?
Of course he's my boss, yeah. But I'm leading the team in the Senate. And as you know, the Liberal Party in government have got a Senate team leader at the moment. I can't recall who he is, so if he's not too significant. And certainly the reason that we're standing is not for individuals. The reason we're standing is because we believe the policies of this country are wrong for the country. We believe there's no real commitment. I can understand at a personal level the Liberal and Labor members of Parliament, because their greatest fear is that they'll lose their election, they won't be able to find a job, they won't be able to support their family. Fortunately, I don't have that problem. And the people who have come to serve us, public service has no reward. Public service is really, your reward is history. And I think that's the difference between our party members. They're made up of people, many former Liberals, Labor and Greens members that are disgusted with the policies and disgusted with what's happened to Australia and believe there's a better way. And I guess I'm one of them.
This puts you in direct competition with Pauline Hanson, Campbell Newman, Amanda Stoker. Do you believe you can actually beat the three of them?
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. You know, the LNP in Queensland would have probably about 8,000 members. We've got 17,500 members. There's no question about that. We're very confident that we'll win Senate seats in Queensland and we'll win House of Rep seats in Queensland. We are standing as the alternate party against the Liberal-Labor duopoly. And we're standing in every seat in the House of Reps.
The Queensland LNP has had some trouble raising money in the past few years. Do you think that puts you at an advantage over them?
Well, in February we'll commence the largest and most extensive political campaign in the nation's history. And I don't think we have any problems raising money or having money or having the necessary financial resources, because we'll be sure that the people of Australia can be informed.
83 million on advertising last election. How much have you budgeted this time around?
I don't budget. We just respond to the political circumstance. But you can rest assured that we'll leave no stone unturned to ensure that our position, what we're offering the Australian people, is clearly communicated.
Mr. Palmer, why will this election go differently for yourself and your team compared to last election?
Well, you only have to live in the last two years to know that. You've only got to have a look at the people on the street. This weekend, of course, will be rallies right around the country and around the world. And if you have a look at the numbers of people that actually turn up on the street, it'll give you a good indication, because the majority of those people are supporters of our party. They're not really supporters of me or individuals. A lot of them feel they have got no hope for themselves and they think Australia can do better. You've got to remember there's been a great departure by the Liberal Party from their principles. The Liberal Party was a party once that believed in freedom of choice, believed in tolerance, believed in the rule of law. We've seen all of those things go by the wayside, and that's only happened in the last 2 years, really. So I think people will be concerned about that. And of course, the union movement has not stood up at all for the workers, and many workers have felt their views haven't been expressed properly or their interests not protected. You saw that with the CFMEU in Melbourne, and that was an extreme example of it. You've seen that with the police and the teachers that have gone to the Supreme Court of Queensland to get injunctions to save their jobs. You saw the situation that we were funding an action in the Supreme Court of Queensland, which was to have a hearing this week to open our state borders. And what did the state government do? They opened the borders on the Tuesday because they didn't want to be beaten in court. That's the reality of it, right? So they're all the reasons, because people have actually seen how politics affect their lives. I think that's the critical thing. Before, she'll be right, mate, politics is pretty boring. It's a minor thing on the agenda. But I think things have changed.
In which order, Mr. Palmer, do you think you'll be preferencing the major parties?
Well, what we can say for sure is we won't be preferencing Liberals, Labors or the Greens in the Senate. Right? We only have to nominate 6 people there. But unfortunately, in the lower house, you have to number every square. So, you know, can say equivocally now that Liberal, Labor, the Greens will be at the bottom of the ticket.
In that order?
I don't know the order because it's not for my decision to make. Believe it or not, it's our national executive. And of course, we don't know at this stage who all the candidates are, right? There were brave people in the Liberal Party who crossed the floor with Craig Kelly. There was Lou O'Brien from here in Queensland that took a principled stand. There were the Senator Rennick also, and the South Australian Senator also crossed the floor. So that, you know, you've got some people with some courage, and you've got to encourage other people to deal with policies that are for Australia.
What about the Liberal Democrats in One Nation?
Well, we've already announced our preferences. Our first preference is going to the Liberal Democrats, and their first preference is coming to us. One Nation we haven't decided yet, but we will be announcing another preference deal with another minor party in the next week or two.
And with 3.4% of the vote, Craig Kelly's not going to be the Prime Minister. So what's the point of all of this? What's the point of spending all this money?
Well, that's just not true. What you've said, you've given our objective at the last election was to ensure that Bill Shorten didn't become Prime Minister. I don't know if you realise it, but Bill Shorten didn't become Prime Minister. That we were polling before that election about 10%, and I asked our people to support the coalition, and still 3.5% of them voted for us. So we achieved our objective. We got exactly what we wanted for the country, because where would we have been if the Labor Party had been in power? We're $1.3 trillion of debt now, but Bill Shorten's Labor's proposal at that election was to spend another $1 trillion on other things. So our debt would have been $2 trillion, right? So I don't regret stopping that from happening.
What do you hope to achieve this time around?
Well, we hope to win the election, and you know, our party numbers are indicating that that's the case. You know, if you look at correlate our party vote with our numbers of members at different elections, you'll see that it's very substantial now. We have 80,000 members. The Liberal Party doesn't have 80,000 members. The Labor Party doesn't have 80,000 members. So that's something you should think about. It's not just how much money you'll spend, it's what support you've got on the ground.
And you mentioned polling. What is your polling showing you, especially in Central and North Queensland?
Well, they're showing us, for example, in Sydney and Melbourne, right, that our votes climbing into the low 20s at the moment, right? It's also showing that there's a very large proportion in our polling of Australians that they don't know. They're in the don't know category at the moment. And when you go into that don't know category, you ask them, well, which party are you leaning towards? And over 40% of them in our polling have said they're leaning towards our party. So, of course, the election campaign has not yet begun. There's got to be the launch of the campaigns. Mr. Kelly's got to set out the agenda the United Australia Party has for Australia. And they're the category of people that will make a difference in the coming months. Right?
That 80,000, you've got to be very confident with that, haven't you? Does it give you a sense of, is it an achievement already, I guess, to get that number?
Well, I think so. I think if you look at, I've been doing elections for 50 years nearly. I've run elections for the coalition in a former life. But let me say that one of the big things in any election campaign for any political party is getting people on the ground to give out your how to vote cards to make impacts and things like that. So if you take our party at the last election, I guess there would have been 1/3 of the seats in Australia that we might have had some presence giving out how to vote cards. Certainly not covering every booth, but maybe covering 50% of them. But I'd say at the moment, we'll be covering every booth with 5 or 6 people. So that'll make a difference because people will see us on the ground. I think it also makes a difference to a lot of people that have changed their votes. I mean, no one would have thought that the members of the Greens party would be joining our party, right? And we've got thousands of people that were with the Greens that have joined our party because they don't like the policies the Greens have come up with on vaccination or a range of other things which are non-environmental. So, we have a party which is trying to unite Australians but at a time of national crisis. And the people that have joined us feel that they're not being listened to. Their views are not being listened to by people in authority, that their livelihood's been put in jeopardy, whether they're working. A lot of people that have joined us, for example, in New South Wales, we've got 20,000 people that have been double vaxxed in a survey that we carried out and seen what they did. And they joined us because they were double vaxxed and they were locked down for 6 months after that, right? So they feel that the government wasn't honest with them and that they've been treated harshly. A lot of people that on the vaccine issue that are double vaxxed have thought that people should have the right of free choice on what medicine they take and what medicine they don't. Others that have joined us are concerned about the future, about the technology to identify who you are, which we've seen happening and developing in China. They're worried that that's what government will do next, a facial recognition technology that will enter a stage where we have government by remote control, where our bank accounts are pillaged, where our identity is known. There'll be a social credit system like what there is in China. These things are very un-Australian, and they sound very un-Australian, but some of the things that have happened in the last couple of years. So there's a lot of concern, but these things will happen to our country. There's a concern too that journalists are no longer free to write their stories, that editors regularly censor their stories, that politicians are black-banned, like Craig Kelly's been back-banned from a number of networks because of his views, because he doesn't agree with someone. And there was an understanding in this country that whether you disagreed with someone or you didn't, would listen to both sides of the argument and would make a decision. It seems to be that that's changing in Australia. And a lot of people are concerned that their relatives died in the Second World War, fought for democracy, that we didn't have totalitarianism. So these are the different concerns that come across to me, and that's one of the reasons why I'm happy to support the party.
Craig Kelly's been quite vocal about his stance on vaccines. Will an anti-vax sentiment be part of policy for your party?
Well, our policy on that particular issue is that people should have the freedom of choice. It's not a question of whether you're pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. That's not what we think. It's up to a person to make up their own decision. That's our official policy, right? Craig's got his own view about vaccines, which he expresses them well, but that's what the party policy is, freedom of choice.
But if he's the leader of the party, doesn't that impact what the party's messaging is?
Yeah, it does, but he also agrees that as well. He's told me that that's what he thinks, that people should be able to make up their choice. I mean, from my point of view, my personal point of view, is that in Australia we've got a great system of approvals with the TGA for vaccines, which has operated nearly for 40 years very successfully. And in that system there's a series of regulations that require about a 10-year testing period for any vaccine, right? And I'm concerned that that's been undermined, that system of integrity. And people have thought that, that this vaccine is like other vaccines which I've had, right? Been through a 10-year program. But the sad truth about the matter is we don't know what the effects of this vaccine will be in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years' time. I can only reflect and compare it with thalidomide, which its negative appearances didn't happen until 5 years after it. I hope that everything's fine. I hope that we don't see a great strain on our health system, but we don't know. But I do think we need to have a approval system that sticks to the history that's shown to be safe for Australians.
Are you vaccinated?
Well, I am vaccinated. I got vaccinated against smallpox and a whole range of things.
For
but
COVID?
Not for COVID. I think I don't think I need a vaccination for COVID personally. I haven't caught it. I have a healthy life. The mean age of people dying is 86. I'm not 86 yet. I don't think I'm in bad shape. I think I look a lot more trim now than I did when I was in Parliament. That's one of the dangers of going to Parliament. It's the parliamentary dining room. But certainly, the people in our party view that they must stand, they must participate in this democracy. They're not in it to get a good salary. And we've got some extraordinary candidates. In Victoria, for example, we've got a member of the Spencer family, from Lady Diana's family, that is standing against us. We've got directors from large accounting companies. We've got the former CEO from Deloitte standing in New South Wales. So really, and we've got a great diversity of people. So what's wrong with a debate? What's wrong with an election? What's wrong with the public's right to know?
You need a vaccine to go to most places in Queensland. How do you plan on campaigning if you can't get into pubs, clubs, restaurants, museums, etc.?
Well, we're just lining up our next case for the Premier to have a look at, so that may not be the case when the election's called. But secondly, the High Court has made it very, very clear that the freedom of political communication in this country is protected by the Constitution. And if anyone gets in the way of that, there'll just be a court order against them, especially with Mr Kelly, who's a member of the House of Representatives, our federal leader, and our party is a registered party under the Electoral Act. So I don't see if those things clash, well, the court will have to sort that out.
You can't be bogged down running up to an election dealing with High Court stuff and whatnot when you're trying to campaign.
Well, I won't be, but I've got enough money to pay for lawyers who love doing these things. It's their business. They enjoy gouging. Well, it won't be very, very quickly if that's what has to happen. It'll happen very quickly.
So you won't plan on letting the mandate stop you from campaigning?
No, it's not going to let us stop us. That's another game of repression that the government takes. It might stop a person that hasn't got a lot of money, but you wait and see what the Australian says I've got in my wealth the next couple of weeks. We certainly can handle anything the government can throw at us.
Did this hotel here where we're having the event ask you for any proof of vaccination when you came in? They're asking other people to prove that they're vaccinated to check in. Did they ask you? I
haven't checked into the hotel and I haven't gone to a restaurant here. I've just come up in the escalator and walked into this room. That's all I've done. But I don't think vaccine's the big issue anyway. I think coming forward it's liberty and freedom that we've got to be concerned about. And I think we've also got to be concerned about our economy. We've got to make sure that we can reduce our debt and we can get our small businesses going. I mean, the profit that's made by a small business normally is on the last 20% of its patronage. This current policies we've got here, of course, eliminates that profit for many people. And if you're in small business, normally you've borrowed money from the bank, you've normally given your house as security, and the banks are calling up those homes from countless thousands of Australians. And that's why they're upset. That's why they're joining our party. That's why we've got 80,000 members, because when they close their small business, while it may be devastating for them, it means 20 people may lose their jobs. And those people may have mortgages as well. So we've got to stop that trend, and we've got to give people an opportunity and a chance in this country to be all they could be.
Can I just ask these two gentlemen if they're also flouting the state's vaccine mandates at the moment? Are you guys both vaccinated?
One of Clive's policies is doctor-patient confidentiality, and I agree with that. I agree that you should have a freedom of choice. So whether you are, whether you're not, it's your business between you and your doctor.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, and the same again in regards to that. I have been vaccinated, but that's my choice to be vaccinated due to family and aged care facilities and also Indigenous communities.
Yeah, I think you don't want to have a beat up about these things. Over half our membership is vaccinated, right? And the rest are not, right? But that's their personal choices. Public policy really should be about the things that we need to get done in the country, about putting people back to work, about having economic growth. Now, are there any more questions we've got? I've just got about another 3 minutes, that's all.
Where are your target seats?
Well, we're targeting every seat in the House of Representatives.
Which ones do you think you're most likely to win though?
Well, I think we can win seats in Western Sydney, Western Melbourne. I think there's seats in Queensland that we can win as well, right? Based on the membership. There are seats in Western Sydney where we've got 3,000 members in one seat, right? So that would indicate a great amount of dissatisfaction with both the Liberal and Labor Party. You know, and of course in Western Sydney you saw them being locked down for 6 months by the Liberal government, while if you lived on the North Shore you didn't have that problem. So that sort of discrimination is bad for Australians. And the same thing happened in Melbourne under Dan Andrews. So I think Australians will make a difference at this election. I think it is a different election, like the question you said before, it's a different election. Because, most Australians, for most of their lives, have not been really that interested in politics, right? But whatever your views, in this coming election, there's a stronger interest. There's a rationale to think, well, hey, what's gone on has affected me and affected my life, and I should have my say. So if we look at, and you believe in democracy and multiple choice in elections, our party stands against the Liberal and Labor parties, right? We give that choice to voters. That's got to be a good thing for Australia. Right, thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.